Welcome to the Kennedy Report, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kennedy Hall. Are women funny? Was Matt Fradd off his rocker when he said women aren't funny? Well, he didn't actually say women aren't funny. That's what it's turned into. But he was exactly correct about comedians and stand-up comedy. And we're going to talk about why in just a second here. But if you don't know what happened, well, Matt Fradd put out a clip of one of his long-form interviews with a priest. I forget his name. I'm going to share the screen here, actually, and we can see this here. So he put out this clip. You can see it here. The name of the clip was Are Women Comedians Generally Worse Than Male Comedians? With Father John Parks. There you go. His name is Father John Parks. Originally, the clip was called Women Aren't Funny, or Are Women Funny, or something like that. Now, in fairness, and I think Matt did a explanation video about this because he received so much heat, you just try to make names for things. There's this line that's this fine line between what is clickbait, what is clicking for clicking's sake, or at the same time, what is grabby? I mean, let's be honest. If you think you have something that is useful for people to hear, and everyone who sits in front of a microphone and a camera probably believes that they have something useful to say, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. If that's the case, then you want to find ways for people to watch your stuff. I mean, I've got this fancy camera, lights, a green screen, and I do have a feminine side. I have a pink shirt. There you go. I've got this boom. I mean, I've got all these things that you do when you put together a podcast look because you want to look a certain way. You want people to watch. Well, the same thing with its marketing. You want people to click on your videos. I mean, if I was to make even something totally just strictly philosophical, or theological, if it was a book about, biblical commentary on the Gospel of John, I might call it, greatest biblical commentary on John ever or something, if you're asking a question, you want people to click it. We all know how the game works. So Matt Fradd did not say that he doesn't think women are funny. He made actually, he went to painstaking lengths, and in the way that he usually does, he seems to be very concerned about coming off in a way that's not unempathetic, which is good. He did not say women aren't funny at all. In fact, in the clip, we won't watch it here because you can check it out yourself, but he actually said that many women are funny, and people are funny. Funny is just, things are funny when they're startling, when there's an incongruity. So why is it funny when somebody slips on a banana peel? Because it breaks the pattern and it forces you to kind of take it lightly. People are funny when they're witty. Anyone can be funny. But what he was talking about was stand-up comedy. And what's funny, haha. There was actually a article that came out by Psychology Today. And I'll tell you about Psychology Today. I'd got no love for Psychology Today. When I was a teacher, someone, when they found out I was a Trump supporter, as a Canadian who can't even vote for him, so it's just like support from afar. But when they found out I was a Trump supporter, I remember they put an article from Psychology Today in my mailbox at work. A colleague of mine, the person remained anonymous, never came forward, saying that you would raise your children to be bad people if you were a Trump supporter. So that was fun. So I don't have any love for Psychology Today. The article was from Psychology Today. I think that they have a lot of garbage. Nonetheless, it seems that in this one here, they have allowed something decent to come through. And it's called, Is It Misogynistic to Not Find Women Funny? And let's read this here, parts of it together, because it's quite interesting, to be honest. I find it quite interesting. And it's written by a female psychologist. Okay. I guess she's wrote something called Exercise Addiction. I've never heard of exercise addiction, but maybe it's real. And it's called A Closer, Why Is It Misogynistic to Not Find Women Funny? A Closer Look at the Research on Who Makes Us Laugh, Why, and What This Means. What's interesting about this, Matt Fradd, Catholic podcast, and I'm telling you, we're in a Catholic moment right now. This Catholic stuff is all over the media. I mean, think about all the different things that have come out. The Sheila Buff story, the Rosary Extremist story, all the press around Roe versus Wade. We are in a Catholic moment right now. Here is Psychology Today A secular publication has nothing to do with Catholicism. Matt Fradd is famous amongst Catholics and probably some Protestants, but it's not like he's some Joe Rogan, famous guy who's going to be reaching these secular circles. And she literally says there's been an uproar in response to Pints with Aquinas podcast host Matt Fradd's statement that female comedians don't make him laugh as much as male comedians. Angry comments, emails, social media posts, and so forth. So they say this statement proves that Matt Fradd is a misogynist. Okay. So she goes, whether women comedians are as funny as male comedians isn't a new question. Researchers have been studying it for decades. They must all be misogynists. But it's concluding that women comedians aren't as funny as males, a display of misogyny. This post is a closer look at what misogyny entails, whether being able to laugh or not at jokes made by women is an example of it, and what the research says. So good definition, misogyny is a hatred or prejudice against women. Sure. I guess, according to this lady, sexism is different than misogyny. I guess that makes sense. I've never really thought about that. I guess, yeah, discrimination, if that means choosing between different things based on someone's sex, I guess that's probably not a bad thing if it entails certain things that are more sex specific. But I guess if what they're saying is that, you assume that a woman can't be intelligent or something like that, that's sexism. And that probably stems from misogyny. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand the thought process from this person. It's reasonable enough. So she says misogyny therefore encompasses negative attitudes or biases against women, not necessarily discriminatory behavior. Okay, fair enough. So she says not finding women comics funny. There are many reasons a comedy fan might not find a female comedian funny, including the individual's humor style and tastes, which vary with age, nationality, political and religious affiliation, and gender, as well as the female comedian's humor style, stage presence, and the quality of their material. Right off the bat, I'm going to say this person comes off as extremely reasonable. Even before we get into the differences of why, it's actually my opinion that women aren't as good at stand-up comedy in general. Stand-up comedy is also very much a den of iniquity. So like most stand-up comics are not very good because it's all about sex and basically it's about glorifying mortal sin. So it's not good. Nonetheless, there are reasons why I think there's actually a sort of a qualitative difference between what men and women are capable of when it comes to that. And I'll get to that in a sec. Generally, not universally, but generally. But right away, I mean, she's saying there's just a difference. There could just be a difference in the content, the abilities of the person. So right away, this is not some crazy feminist who's saying that like, just because she's a woman, you should listen to her or something like that. She's literally saying it could just be that the female comics just aren't very good at being a comedian and therefore they're not very good. Fair enough. That could be the case. Even if there were no differences between men and women when it came to their ability to do stand-up comedy, even if that wasn't the case in a general sense, it could just be by the laws of averages, what's available, that women don't do stand-up comedy as often and the talent pool isn't as big. Therefore, there's not as many talented women doing stand-up comedy as there are men. It could be just that. And that could be the end of the argument. That would be totally nothing to do with gender, sex, whatever. It would nothing to do with thoughts about men or women, just about objectively speaking, this is what we see. Fair enough. The article continues. And she says, research tells us that women tend to produce and enjoy more positive humor, styles like telling amusing stories or maintaining a humorous perspective on life's challenges, while men tend to produce and enjoy more negative styles, sarcasm, teasing, and self-deprecation. That seems pretty accurate. Women have also been found to prefer neutral or absurd humor, while men have been found to prefer sexual and aggressive humor. That probably makes sense too. Thus, women's humor may not be as funny to men, while men's humor may not be as funny to women. Fair enough. Rather than being a reflection of misogyny or misandry, I guess, is that hatred of men? I've never heard that term, misandry. Dislike of one's gender's typical humor style could simply reflect a preference for the style more common to one's gender. Fair enough. The Messenger. Joke content alone isn't always enough to make us laugh. A comedian's delivery and their confident stage present attractiveness and performance ability also help determine whether we find a joke funny. Okay. This is actually something that I was thinking about beforehand. And she goes on and says, confidence also influences stage presence, a crucial factor in performer success described by researchers as the quality of having prestige or authority, coupled with an ability to command others' attention and be convincing. Performers' confidence, command, and authority help determine the trust and audience members must have in performers to find them entertaining, particularly to enjoy stand-up comedy. Okay. She does go on and say, unfortunately, attractive women are judged to be less trustworthy. I guess that's the case. Maybe that's like some sort of study. That would be a difference. She also talks about anxiety. And goes on to talk about, is this misogyny or whatever? And she says, those who believe Fradd or anyone else is misogynistic based solely on his expressed preference for male versus female comedians without consideration of his opinions about women in non-comedic contexts, maybe jumping to broad conclusions without ample evidence. The outrage towards Fradd typifies the knee-jerk accusatory fervor characteristic of internet discourse in general, a microcosmic iteration of our growing intolerance for nuance, digesting complex realities, or civilly respecting the opinions of others when such opinions don't perfectly align with our own. I encourage readers to take a look at the Pints with Aquinas excerpt. So this is Catherine Schreiber, Jewish maybe background? I don't know. Cullen, co-author of The Truth About Exercise Addiction, Understanding the Dark Side of Thinspiration, and a psychotherapist and writer based in New York. I don't even know if this woman's a Catholic. Maybe we should look that up soon. Catherine Schreiber, Schwarzenegger. I don't know. No idea. So she's written for Cosmopolitan. So that's not a Catholic magazine. I don't even want to look at the images in case they're scandalous. So, I mean, this is not some sort of let's close that. This is not some sort of like right-wing Catholic Christian woman. This is actually very interesting that this article even came up. This is my bubbly. Maybe if I'm Canadian, I'll call it my Michael Bublé. Anyway, bad joke. So see, it's not funny just because I'm a man. But anyway, so the part that I found very interesting in that article was this idea that things like stage presence, authority, etc. That's very true. So here's the thing about stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is not the same thing as being funny. Anyone can be funny because funny comes in 100 different ways. A little 2-year-old girl can be funny because she's just being silly. Your wife can be funny because you understand her nuances and her quirks make you laugh. There can be things that have nothing to do with what you would call stand-up comedy that are funny. Stand-up comedy, though, is primarily and ultimately storytelling. The reason why you laugh at stand-up comics is because they present you with a story or they set in motion a narrative of storytelling that you interact with and come to immerse yourself in. And then from there, because you are basically suspending your disbelief, most comics are just making things up. The other day I walked into this whatever. That guy's been telling that joke for 10 years. It wasn't the other day. It was like 25 years ago. But it's just an act, right? But they're telling you a story and they're immersing you in it in a way where it forces you to get lost in it. And then when they present to you with this incongruency, is that the word? Yeah, when it's incongruous, this sort of contradiction or contrast or thing that grips you out of this attention, it basically startles you and you laugh. That's kind of how it works. So to be a good storyteller, there's a few things that you have to possess. For one, she talked about stage presence. That's important too. I've done tons of public speaking, teaching, conferences, podcasting, radio, whatever. To be honest, you say, hey, I'll give you, or not even, just go on stage and talk to 10,000 people for 5 minutes now with no script. I could do it. It's not a problem for me at all. Someone like myself, I'm not a comedian, but I'm just saying I get what that's like. I'm not intimidated. There are women who are not intimidated, but generally speaking, men historically are just more able, generally speaking, to sort of command the presence of an audience because it's a matter of stature, authority, and so forth. It's a fact. Here's another part that she didn't mention, which I think is super important. Voice. So think about, and again, comedy is largely a den of iniquity. So I'm not saying go look up the recent stand-up comments. There are many clean comics that are good, but think about comics that have been incredible. One of the things that they're able to do, pretty much all of them, are impressions. Okay, they're able to do multiple voices. That's a big deal. If you're telling a story and you can change the timbre of your voice within various octaves of degree, then you will sound like different persons and create a more rich storytelling experience. So why can men, generally speaking, do that better? Well, listen to my voice. There's a reason why I narrate audiobooks, done radio, that sort of thing. I have a deeper bass, baritone, basso profundo type range, okay? But I'm vocally trained as a singer growing up. I can also do the high, crazy falsetto thing, and I can hit, I could do 7 or 8 different character ranges of voices because I'm starting with a low male voice and I have the ability to go up. It's actually much harder to go down than it is to go up. If you don't have a low voice, like making your voice low, if I was to speak lower like this, if you don't already have a low voice, it comes off as very hokey. This is why when men impersonate women, it's hilarious. When women dress up as men and try to impersonate them, it's really not that funny because you can't actually believe that they're a guy. They can't make their voice sound low enough to come off as a guy. Women do impersonations of males in voice acting, but usually only for children. So, for example, the woman who narrated Bart Simpson in The Simpsons for years, she's a woman and she's done tons of voices, but she does women, and she does boys. She can't do a man because she can't do that. Whereas think of Eddie Murphy. Those movies are bad, but I'm saying everyone knows The Nutty Professor and movies like that. He was a stand-up comic. He could actually make himself come off like he's doing a good impersonation of a woman because as a male, he has the vocal register in order to extend across that range of vocal timbre, if that makes sense. Women just can't do that. They physiologically do not have male voices. Even when a woman has a low voice, she doesn't sound like a man. Whereas I know growing up, I used to make my mom laugh all the time. I won't do the impression now, but my Nonna, God rest her soul, she had this high voice and I could do her voice and sound basically the exact same. I remember one time leaving a message for my mom on the phone and I sounded like my Nonna. I could also sound like my Nonno. My sisters, my family members, they could never in a million years sound like my Nonno because they can't. Anyway, so men have a different type of voice. So when you combine the ability for a man with his vocal flexion, which translates into an ability to communicate because of the sharpness of the diction coming out of his mouth, and you combine that with the presence that he has because he has a sort of masculine confidence about him, and the fact that he can then do a range of voices, it's just very unlikely that a woman, basically in a physiological sense, could produce the same sort of stand-up comedy experience because she doesn't necessarily have the tools to create the same storytelling experience. And stand-up comedy is good when it's good storytelling. Of course, I'm sure there are women who are funny and that's fine and everything, but generally speaking, in the world of stand-up comedy, it's going to be the exception, not the rule. So I think Matt Fradd was right. And this woman who did this article in Psychology Today, New York Cosmopolitan, I think she was Jewish, definitely not a traditional minded Catholic or something. I think it's interesting that she joined in to the conversation, and it just shows how deep this whole Catholic thing is going. Again, I mean, why is it that the secular world is caring about a clip from Matt Fradd's Pint with Aquinas? What's funny is this lady, I don't know what her reach is. She just encouraged tons of people to watch Matt Fradd's clip. So funny enough. So I agree with Fradd. Women as stand-up comics are at a disadvantage. Most comedians are garbage anyway, because I said, the content of what they talk about, but nonetheless, There are my reasons why. If you disagree, fair enough, but you're not going to change my mind. All right. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. I always forget to say that in the beginning. I've got to get some sort of reminder. Anyway, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Click the links in the description to see how you can help us grow. We appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you so much for all your support. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.